Hello, friends. Welcome to the Cold War Prepper. This is Lee, and tonight we're going to continue on with our questions that we're studying about the USCIS, United States Customs and Immigration Service. Oh, excuse me. Bank of Questions for Citizenship. Kind of interesting. Tonight we're going to do 13 questions about history. They've got it broken up into different sections, and so I figured that we just take on those 13 questions from history. Hello, Little Lone Prepper. And I saw Triple G Farms and Matthew Malloy. Golly, great people. Only one here right now. Golly, that can't be right. Because I was just talking with Matthew, and I know Triple G is on. Maybe my counter is just a little bit slow. But anyhow, wow, what a weekend. Hi, Holly. Are you as shocked and awed as I am about the weekend? So we had basically the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. So if you remember, that's where Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan tried to take out, tried to take out the country of Israel. They wanted to eradicate it. And of course, the Israelis got their stuff together very quickly. We thought it was going to go into a World War III, but they got their stuff together very quickly, and they just kicked butt. As a matter of fact, it's a result of that war that if you remember, the Sinai Peninsula belonged to Egypt, and then the Gaza Strip was part of that Egyptian territory. So as a result of the Yom Kippur War in 1973, October 6th through the 24th, I believe it was, 1973, Israel occupied the West Bank of the Jordan River, took that away from Jordan, signed a peace agreement with Jordan, basically occupied the Sinai Peninsula as a buffer zone, and that created kind of the Gaza Strip where that was kind of an enclave. They offered to allow the Palestinians to live in Israel as long as they promised to be nice. And, there were certain conditions that had to be met. And they didn't like that. So they gave them their own little enclave. But because of all the terrorist incursions, they walled it off and everything else. And it's been something else. But, when you teach your children to hate for so long, you can't be surprised when, stuff like this happens, because it's just an inbred hate. And, although this is one of those oxymorons that I just didn't understand. I heard a politician on TV give a quotable quote, "I hate hatred." How's that for an oxymoron? But anyhow, so that's where we were. They attacked across the border just after, and I'm going to mispronounce it. My Hebrew is terrible. I can read it, but I can't pronounce it. Sukkot, which is basically a holy day, and it went into Shabbat, and then which is their Sabbath. And so then they attacked, and the Israelis are kind of counterattacking, and they're going to level Gaza. I tell you, I think they're going to level Gaza. The last I saw was about 900 Israelis killed, including 8 Americans. A couple thousand, 1,800 to 2,000 severely wounded, hospitalized. And then we've got kind of the same results on the Palestinian side. So the Israelis started taking out the Gaza. They gave the civilians a chance to leave. Of course, where do you go? But they have all those tunnels, so they could go down, leave the city via the tunnels. That's how they're getting the weapons in. So why not just use the tunnels to evacuate the citizens and evacuate the city? And so they started tearing down Gaza, basically. Well, now Hamas has declared, and Israel declared war on Hamas. Hamas has declared full-blown war on Israel. Hezbollah, which is the same group, basically, in Jordan, has declared war on Israel, and so they're getting ready. They're amassing on the border. Israel is sending tanks and everything else up to the northern border. It looks like Jordan's going to sit this one out. Thank God. Turkey has offered to be a mediator, but Turkey has told NATO to stay out of it, because if push comes to shove, they're going to take the side of the Palestinians, which of course would be counter to everything that NATO represents. Now, remember, Israel is not a member of either the European Union or NATO, so there's no obligation there other than our bilateral agreement to support them. There's no agreement anywhere that would cause NATO to come in. It used to be, it was a British protectorate until the end of World War II, and that's when Britain gave it to the Jews to resettle for a homeland. Hi, Pat. Welcome. Stray Kitten. Diana, too. Yep. So it's a mess. It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. We've got pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli marches going on in Chicago and in New York City. It's not going to be limited to those two towns. Remember that, the attacks on the synagogues has not been necessarily in New York City and in Chicago. It has been in other areas. And then you've got Ilhan Omar from the Michigan area, about Flint, Michigan, I think it is, might be Detroit. And then you've got Talib, and she's down south somewhere. But they were elected by large Muslim populations, and so the thing is, the Shia and the Sunni are like this. Think of it kind of like the way that the non-denominational or denominational Christians view the Catholics, right? They believe in the same thing, basically. It's just how they do it. So this group doesn't like this group because they believe different. They worship differently than this group. Or the Shia and the Sunni are the same way. They believe everything is basically the same. Their main contention is who is the authority. If this isn't the exact same thing, who is the authority here on earth to represent after Muhammad went to heaven, right? So we've got the same thing here. Remember that in 1517, what was his name? Martin Luther said, no, I don't recognize the Pope. And so he had to split. And so he didn't recognize the supremacy of the Pope and all this kinds of stuff. And so now that's been translated into the Protestants. And so it's terrible. We forget we're all Christians. We should love each other. And the same thing with the Muslims. But, the one thing that unifies the Muslims is when they have an opportunity to attack the Jews. So when they have an opportunity to fight the Jews, they unify and bang, they're together. They're going to be together on this one. They'll die together, whatever. But as soon as it's over, then bang, it's back to fighting with each other again. So I would say this: we haven't seen the end of it. It's going to be a long protected thing. Is this what? I've seen an awful lot of people making dire predictions that this is the biblical end of the world and everything else. But Matthew 26, people will quote that one quote in Matthew 26 quite often. Wars and rumors of wars. God, I get tired of hearing it. But there has not been a year that there has not been a war since God, who knows when. It's there's always been wars and rumors of wars. So that's kind of. But they forget this one sentence, and let me get that, because everything's always taken out of context, and so. There's a 20. No, 26 is that 24. Okay, so Matthew 24, you will hear of wars and reports of wars, rumors of wars. I use the New International Translation. So you'll hear of wars and reports of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for these things must happen, and it will not yet be the end. It says it right there, and it will not yet be the end. But people use that and say, this is the end and everything else. And so people like to take out there's the first line, or I'm sorry, the first stanza of Paul Simon's song in 1968 to make number one on the Billboard Top 40. The Boxer, man, I'm just a poor man whose soul is never found. And it says, the last two lines say, man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And I think we quite often do that by pulling a phrase or something out of the Bible, and we forget to read the rest of it. So no, this is not the end of mankind. Later on, if you continue on in chapter 24, it says, and these things shall not come to pass until the whole world has been given the gospel. So until we've preached the gospel to the entire world, the end cannot come. It's just plain black and white. Bam! That's how it is. So, but could this be, a terrible war? It could be the beginning of a terrible war. I will say that. This is, make sure you're getting your preps taken care of. Please make sure you're getting your preps taken care of. Prioritize those things that you need. Make sure you get them. Do not go in debt in order to do it, because it looks like we've got some stock market, real estate issues, and dollar issues and everything else. This war probably can expand to the point to where the price of gasoline, the price of fuel, oil is going to go up. So I would be prepared for that. We've already got the price increases hitting the market because of the drought and the floods and everything else that we've had with the food market this year. So just be cautious of that. So that's kind of where we are. All I'm going to do is tell you, hey, keep your head on a swivel. Watch out what's going on around you. So I was talking with Mr. Malloy before the thing, and yeah, I've had two, and it makes me question my own personality at times. I've had two less than oh gosh, what would you call them? Less than kind, polite, and respectful conversations in the past week. So one of them was a guy that I like, David Lynn, Prepper Principal, and I met this guy on his channel. He's always asking people, please subscribe to me, and I'll subscribe to you. So I subscribe to him, and I watch his things, and I comment. So he put out a video, a 1 minute short, it was just him riding on a bus and showing out the window. And I said, gosh, that looks flat enough to be Indiana. And boom, boy, you're an idiot. Look at all the vehicle license plates. And I tell you, and you've got this building, and this building only occurs in this state. And guy, no. Look, this conversation could have been as simple as, yes, it does, doesn't it? Or it does look that flat, but it's not. That you don't have to call somebody stupid for not looking at license plates and stuff like that. So for the first time in all the time that I have been on YouTube, I unsubscribed. I have been a firm believer of not unsubscribing, but I just unsubscribed from this guy. I said, I don't need that stuff. There's another guy. He's done 2 10-minute videos. What do you call them? Video responses. And one of them is he disagrees with these 2 PhDs. Now, this guy doesn't even understand the difference between valence chemistry and nuclear physics. But 2 PhDs wrote this book. Both of them PhDs in nuclear science. And the question was, what happens when you have irradiated water? And basically, the water itself does not change chemical formula. It doesn't add any electrons or anything like that. What it is you have radioactivity, radioactive fallout suspended in the water, kind of like sugar, okay? So you can filter that out, and then the water's good to drink. And he disagreed with that. He did 2 10-minute. Lee's an idiot because he believes this book and because this. And so I've had, I'm a member of the American Civil Defense Association. I had a PhD in nuclear physics, let him know that, yeah, that Lee's right. And then I've got another guy that worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory say, yeah, Lee's right. And so all you got to do is apologize, but that hasn't happened. So today, one of my favorite channels, a guy by the name of Mark, has Texas News Studio, and he's out of Dallas, and he puts out, great content. If you want to be up to date on the news, he puts out great content, and I would say subscribe to him. He's got one of his moderators, a guy by the name of Hilly Billy, came out and said, don't forget that the Antichrist must be a Jew because, and the Jews are going to reject them. And I said, can you help me? I don't understand that. He says, well, it's in the Bible. I said, well, okay. So, there's 3 mentions of the Antichrist, and all 3 of those are in the Epistle of John. I said, I can't find it. And he said, well, you're looking in the wrong place. It's in Mark. Jesus says, if you do not accept one who comes in the name of my Father, then will you accept? If someone comes in his own name, will you accept him? And so it's posed as a question. And he says, that's proof that the Antichrist is going to be a Jew. And I said, I can't go that far. So because I disagreed with that, and I said, I can't go that, I can't stretch it that far. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I got blocked. So don't disagree with their moderators when they talk about religion, because you either believe what they do or you get blocked. And that's just the way it is here on planet Earth on Monday, October 9th, 2023. That's strange. Yeah, the only thing I disagree with Little Lone Prepper in the fact that he makes everybody a moderator, and I've seen this guy block all kinds of channels because he says that they are pro-slave or something, but he just blocked people left and right. And I disagree with that. I think that if you're going to give somebody moderator privileges, you have to trust them, that they're going to be representing your channel and giving people an opportunity to speak their piece and to disagree politely, and not shut people down for disagreeing. But but that's my thought process. So, but yeah, I have seen him shut other people down, and he has his thing to do. He has his ways, and I have mine, and obviously they are not in sync with each other. So, Mr. Malloy, that's the explanation of how I'm having kind of a bad day. Those things. One of my other favorite channels, the Roaming Prepper Pete, this morning, he had a live, and he was on target. He was preaching, and then all of a sudden his channel kind of got locked up, and so I waited and waited, but we were having a really good discussion in that, so I lost that. But we've got a full moon, and that's where the word lunatic comes from. Is the Romans believe that every time you have a full moon, luna, you have a tick, that the craziness comes out. So the full moon causes craziness. We also have a partial 80% partial eclipse of the sun, solar eclipse, coming on Saturday. So that's another one that could be causing all this craziness out there. Well, that's enough. We're 20 minutes into this, and golly, we haven't gotten to what we're here for. So let me get into that. Welcome, everybody. And this was really kind of a history tonight. They've got it divided up into politics, Constitution, then they go into history. And then next week, we're going to be doing, oops, that's the wrong tab. Next week, it's going to be history 1800s. So that sounds kind of exciting. So history of the U.S. in the 1800s. Let me get up here. Let me see what the comments are here. Hello, Sandy Aaron. Welcome. No, I understand that. I think David's fine. The only thing I disagree with him on is giving people like that moderator status so that they can block people for no reason whatsoever. That's the only thing I would disagree with David for. So anyhow, banners. Here we go. What is the one reason colonists, or what is one of the reasons that colonists came to America? So there are several, actually. And I found out something interesting in my studies of the colonists coming to America. I think you'll find this one, and it goes back to kind of religion as well. Anybody? What are some of the reasons that the colonists came back to America? Remember when it happened. So in 1492, right, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So that was right when we had Spain had its final battle, freeing itself from Moorish occupation, the Islamic occupation of Spain, and they were expanding westward. Then in the 1500s, we had the Pilgrims come to the United States. So we've got religious freedom. Land, opportunity, absolutely. The original meeting, the resources, fantastic. Yes. So the original meaning, the original reason they came over was, remember, we had the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and that was a financial thing. They were coming over to see what they could get as far as um, commerce. And the same thing with the Virginia colony. And so what we were trying to do is we were trying to establish trading outposts. Later on, you had the Hudson Bay colony. Remember, they went up into Canada and they were trying to get exports and everything back to resources back to England. Well, during this time, between the time that we had the original settlements and the next major migration, is when people started coming, not for necessarily money, economic reasons, but they came for freedom of religion, because what had happened was in 1517, we had Martin Luther hang his thesis. He broke off, started Lutheran religion. Then we had John Wesley and a couple of others break off from Luther, and they started Protestantism and Calvinism and all these other different religions. I would say denominations of Christianity. That's probably a better way to say that. So then we also had King Henry VIII, who wanted his 8th divorce, and the church would not give him an annulment. So he left the church and the Catholic Church and formed the Church of England. And everybody had to tithe to the Church of England. So then, right around that same time, we had the first English translation of the Bible. So up until that time, the primary Bible that had been used in Europe had been the Latin Vulgate. So they took the Greek and Hebrew texts and translated them into Latin, and that was the primary Bible. Then they took that and translated it into English, and that was done by Calvin in Geneva, Switzerland, and that was called the Geneva Bible. So the Bible that was brought over to Plymouth Rock and to Portsmouth and to the Virginia colonies was the Geneva Bible. So if you go to the historical institutes there and you see a Bible, it's going to be the Geneva Bible. A little bit after King Henry, we had King James. Well, at that time, the Church of England had the Common Book of Prayer, and they were using the Geneva Bible. But in the original translations of the Bible, there's a lot of stuff that's anti-aristocracy. So King James asked that it be retranslated, and making aristocracy look a little bit better in the translations. He also did one other thing. There's something called the concluding doxology. And it was not in either the Latin, the Greek, or the Hebrew versions, but it is added to the King James Version. And so when Jesus teaches the Our Father, it ends in deliver us not into temptation, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Okay. Well, King James had the concluding doxology added into the King James translation, and that says, and let me see. And yours be the glory, or whatever, but it's a concluding doxology. So that was added to the King James translation. So the other thing is, at that time, King James also redid the Common Book of Prayer from King Henry. And that's where we get the ashes to ashes, dust to dust at memorial services or at funeral services. That's where that comes from. It's the English Book of Common Prayer. So a lot of stuff was in there. But now, right, if you didn't belong to the Church of England, you were going to, thank you, little lone prepper, for thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. There we go. That's the concluding doxology. So that is not in any other translation. Okay. So now what they're doing is they're seeking freedom of religion, freedom to get away from the Church of England. There was King James and Mary, remember Mary, Queen of Scots, had basically a war, the War of the Roses, over whether Mary wanted to make England Catholic again. And of course, James wanted to keep it Protestant. And so you had a long war over that as well, and the War of Succession. So certainly freedom of religion, political liberty, religious freedom, economic opportunity to practice their religion, escape persecution because of the religions, So any of those answers are correct. So thank you. That was great for everybody. So who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? So by Europeans, we have to include the French, we have to include the Spanish. Remember, the Spanish are going down into the Yucatan Peninsula, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, South America. We have the French going into Louisiana through the Gulf of Mexico. We also have them going up into the north. There we go. There's the right answer. Well, and the Vikings, yes, there is some belief that Eric the Red and some of the others came and found Newfoundland, and which is definitely part of North America. And then there's also the theory that the Native Americans are quasi-Caucasian because they originated from the Caucasians who came across from Siberia, across Kamchatka to the Bering Strait, and then across the Aleutian Islands up into Alaska, and then settled down into North America that way. But I think probably the answer that we would most likely want to say are those indigenous Americans, Native Americans, who had their own cultures here prior to our arrival. But the Vikings is definitely, the Vikings is also a good answer. Okay. What group of people were taken to America and sold as slaves? So what group of people were taken to America and sold as slaves? Well, Holly, I would say that the Celts are basically Europeans. And the same thing with the Vikings, but we can say that some of the Celts probably came across along with the Vikings. So this is basically part of the dark history of the United States, and that is slavery. Most people don't realize. Yes, absolutely, Diana, to Africans. So most people don't realize it, but basically, the public sale of slaves, as far as importation from across the streets, was banned in the late 18th century. Once we got it may even been earlier than that. So you could only trade in slaves who were already here, and that was already in place even up to the war between the states. Absolutely correct, Triple G, and I think they don't stress that enough. Indentured servants. So when we talk about indentured servants, and that's primarily people from both Italy and from Ireland. And so what it was they wanted the freedom opportunity. They wanted the opportunity to have land. Remember that we're talking about the 15, 16, 1700s. And so the mark of a person being more than just, rebel, a rabble, was that they owned land. So the opportunity to come here to own land increased their stature greatly. So a lot of people want to come here and own land so that they could increase their public stature. And but they couldn't afford the trip on the boat to get here. So what they would do is they would sign a contract with a person who was already here, or with one of the other companies like the Hudson Bay Company, and say, "Look, I'll give you 7 years service in exchange for passage on a boat. So when I get there, once I get there, I'm yours for 7 years. But then as soon as those 7 years are over, I become a free man. I can go out and get my own land, get my own income, and all that kinds of stuff." So yes, the indentured service. So the difference between an indentured servant and a slave was indentured servants. The time period of their servitude was finite. For a slave, it was infinite. That's primarily the difference between the two. And yes, I will agree with that. They were enslaved for a period of 7 years, but it did have a terminal point. When did the colonists fight the British? When did the colonists fight the British? So I'll give you a hint. The colonial army was founded on June 6th, 1775. Okay. So the colonists, the colonial army was formed, and you had to have that before you could declare independence. So this was basically right after Lexington, Concord. We also had the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party. So you had all kinds of things going on prior to the establishment of um, the colonial army. So actually, the war started in 1775, but we didn't give a formal declaration of independence until July 4th of 1776. So, and you're going to be amazed at some of these things here, because we actually went to war in 1775, declared war 1776, but then it didn't end until 1784. Okay. So kind of strange. A lot of people don't realize that. So, and another thing that will probably remember, that the colonists, the vast majority of the colonists, with the exception of the Hudson Bay area in Louisiana, were in Florida. Florida was a Spanish colony. Louisiana and the Hudson Bay area, which is basically up around northern Vermont, New Hampshire, even to the shores of New York on the lake there. That was all French. And that's why we had the French and Indian Wars. And that's where basically George Washington became a colonel and eventually a general, along with several other of the notable Revolutionary War officers who fought in the colonial war. They got their commissions in the colonial as colonists from the Crown of England, fighting on behalf of the British Crown against the French in the French and Indian Wars. And that's one of those expenses that the British Crown wanted to recover the expenses for, and that's why they came out with the Stamp Act. They figure, hey, if we're going to send our army over to keep you guys free, then you guys need to bear the burden of financing and repaying the Crown for the expenses we incurred for that defense. And that's where the real separation kind of really started at that point. But one of the things that we do quite often that's misquoted is because the colonists were primarily British, and that's where I was going with this, then chances of Paul Revere on his ride saying the British are coming is probably extremely inaccurate, because he was British at the time. So to say the British is coming meant nothing to the colonists, because they were all British. So he probably said something more to the effect of either the redcoats are coming, meaning the army, or the regulars are coming, the regular army. But it most likely was not the redcoats. Most likely was not the British are coming. Hello, Muskoka Oma. Welcome. Hello, Stray Kitten. Welcome. And let me see. So we are down here. So why did they fight the British? And we kind of alluded to that. Taxation without representation. They didn't have any representation in the parliament because of boarding and quartering. So basically, when the British Army went in, let's say, into Boston, General Burgoyne or somebody like that would take a house and say, this is going to be my house. This is going to be my headquarters. And then he could kick the colonists out. And then in the houses around him, he would kick the colonists out of their homes so that his soldiers could be housed in a relatively close proximity to him, and they wouldn't have to build barracks. Okay, so that's the main reason why we have the Third Amendment. Okay, so the Third Amendment says, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So basically, you have to be given just compensation if they take your house away from you. And in peacetime, they can't do it without your permission. So that's the Third Amendment. Okay. Yahoo! Cats and prepping. You're great. You're getting this great. Diana, it quite often does, unfortunately. It all too often really does. I don't know how we forget things, Take a look at what's going on in Israel right now. 50th anniversary of the exact same thing happening 50 years ago, almost to the day. October 6th, 1973, October 7th, 2023. Yeah, so, it's crazy. So, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? There you go. Thomas Jefferson. Amen. And who is the primary author of the Constitution? Okay, let's just stew on that one for a bit. Let's go to the next question. When was the Declaration of Independence signed or adopted? No, when? No, Franklin was there. He was. I've got a trivia question about that one too. I don't know if that's going to be this week. Yeah, it'll be in the questions this week. The primary author of the Constitution was Hamilton. So, but anyhow, let's get here. When was it adopted? When was the Declaration of Independence adopted? July 4th, 1776. There we go. Little known prepper. Yay. Okay. There were 13 original states. Name 3. So when I've got the answer here, I've got them in the order in which I memorized that they came into the states, that they ratified the Constitution. So I had a guy who was really good at human beings and psychology and everything else. He says, Lee, close your eyes. Imagine a delicate plate. And stuck in that delicate plate is a black pin. And balanced ever so precariously on that black pin is a Jersey cow. Sitting on the Jersey cow is King George. And how do you know it's King George? He's wearing a crown. And you look very closely and there's blood coming down. And you notice that the crown is connecting a cut. So you look inside, you go up on top, you look down inside the crown, you notice a mass of ice. And on that mass of ice, you see an adorable figure skater, and you look closely and it's Marilyn Monroe. But in her left hand, she's holding a model of an ocean liner, and it's pointed north. And then you look at that ocean liner, there's something strange about it. You look in the smokestack, and way down inside of the smokestack, you see a ham that's being roasted. And if you look at that ham that's being roasted, you notice that it's wrapped in sheet music, and that sheet music is carrying me back to old Virginia. So you figure, enough of this poo-poo, I'm going to get out of the smokestack. You go up and you look at her other hand, and in her other hand, she has an ocean liner heading south. And then you look at the bow of the ocean liner heading south, and on the bow of that ocean liner is the Empire State Building. And on top of the Empire State Building is a crowing Rhode Island red. So if you can use that as a mnemonic, then what you have is you have the first 13 states in the order in which they were admitted to the, or adapted the Constitution. I'm sorry, ratified the Constitution and became the first 13 states. So you've got the delicate plate, black pin, Jersey cow, King George, Connecticut, massive ice, Marilyn Monroe, ocean liner heading north, ham wrapped in carrying me back to old Virginia. Then you see on the other ocean liner in her other hand, heading south on the bow of the boat, is the Empire State Building. And on top of it is a crowing Rhode Island red rooster. So if you can remember that, then you can memorize the first 13 states in the order in which they come, that they acceded to the Union. How's that? So, what happened at the Constitutional Convention? Do you remember where it was? That's a bonus question for you. Do you remember where it was? Yes, cats and prepping, for some it is. But I've had people memorize the first 13 states in their proper order in less than a minute if you do it properly. I just did it real quickly. But if you do it properly in the proper sequence, then yes, Philadelphia is great. Pennsylvania is a good answer as well. It was in the old Town Hall in Philadelphia. Gorgeous building. I can't believe how small it is relatively. They've also got the Liberty Bell in that same area. So the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, both in the same place, the Independence Hall. So what happened there? Well, we had the Constitution was written, and and then it was sent out for ratification. Now there was a problem, and so we had two different ratifications. So we had the ratification of the original Constitution, and then there were some other things they wanted to add to it called the Bill of Rights. And so that in order to get both of those passed, they had to send both of those separately to the states in order for the states to ratify them. So the Constitution was ratified first, and the Bill of Rights was ratified sometime after that. That is the primary reason why the Federalist Papers was written. These were a series of newspaper articles that were explaining the Constitution and explaining the Bill of Rights to the people so that the people would ensure that the state legislatures accepted the Bill of Rights and passed them on and ratified them. So most likely, yes. He was probably there. He was probably one of the signing delegates. So the Constitution, remember the war ended in 1784 and the Constitution was ratified in 1787. So we've got this whole period from 1775 to 1787, 12 years that it took us really to create this country. Now, before we had the Constitution, we had something called the Articles of Confederation. They don't ask about it here in the USCIS questions, but that is something you need to look up, the Articles of Confederation. It's a pretty good document. It doesn't go as far as the Constitution for sure, but it's a good document. So, fantastic. Yes, absolutely. Another 3. When did West Virginia separate from Virginia? When did it become 2 states? Okay, so the Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. So can you name, there were 4 writers for these letters that appeared in all the town newspapers. Who just name one of those 4? Civil War, absolutely. Let alone prepper, yes. West Virginia wanted to stay as with the Union, and Virginia itself proper broke away from the Union. So yes, that's correct. Yeah, it was approximately 1860, 1861. You're right. Okay, so there were 4 authors. We know 3 of them. The 4th one we think may have been Benjamin Franklin. We're not sure because the name he used in all of his writings was Publius, and Publius is Latin for public. So basically, it was the same thing as anonymous at that time. So the other primary authors of the Federalist Papers were James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. Name one thing besides the kite that Benjamin Franklin is famous for. Yes, great going. What's one thing that Benjamin Franklin was made famous for? He was an ambassador. Good answer, Matthew. Do you know what country? Potbelly stove. Good answer, Sandy. Yes, he was the ambassador to France. Good going, Cats and Prepping. What else? I gave you one. He was the oldest member at the Constitutional Convention. He was also the first postmaster of the United States. He was the author of Poor Richard's Almanac, and he established the first free libraries in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, and a couple other places. But he started the first free public libraries. And flying a kite in a storm and getting semi-electrocuted. Who is considered the father of our country? As a matter of fact, he has such a high place that they actually, yes, inventing eyeglasses. Great going, Stray Kitten. Yes. Or no, Diana too. I'm sorry. Yeah, and Stray Kitten, Sandy Aaron, you got it. George Washington is considered the father of our country. The citizens were so impressed with his stuff during the Revolution that they offered him. They wanted to make him the king of the United States, and so that's where that famous exchange came through with Benjamin Franklin with some lady as he was walking out of Constitution Hall, and she says, "What have you given us?" He says, "I've given you a republic, ma'am, if you're good enough to keep it." And so that's they had argued about whether or not we would have another monarch, and whether or not it would be another hereditary position. But that was considered, believe it or not. And of course, that led to the next question, which is who is the first president? So that's kind of it for the questions, the 1700 history questions and all that kinds of stuff. What questions do you have or comments do you have about all of that? And so for those of you who don't know, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Israel is about 8 hours ahead of me here in the central time zone. So right now, if we take 8 and add 8 to it, that's 1648. 1648 minus 12 is 448. So it's 448 tomorrow morning. In Israel, sunrise is about 7:30. So we got about another 3 hours before the possibility of all hell breaking loose. So please, keep your head on a swivel. Stay aware of what's going on around you. It can get tumultuous, I would say. I am very concerned at the division that we have here in the United States. So we've seen these protests going on in New York City. We've seen protests going on in Chicago. And we've also seen counter protests in both of those cities. So we've seen extremely large pro-Palestinian protests in both New York City and Washington. It would not surprise me to see those also happening in the very near future in a lot of other Arab populated locations in the near future, like Michigan, portions of the southeastern U.S. and stuff like that. Oh, look at that. An honest person. Oh my goodness gracious. That's okay. That's one of the things we say is that sometimes immigrants know more about our country than we do because we failed teaching civics and history and to even our high school students. So all hell's about ready to break loose in the Middle East. We've got the Gerald R. Ford task group heading towards the Eastern Mediterranean. I'm going to assume it's going there as a deterrent force, but it could be there. People could take it as a provocation. Then we've got another task force, another aircraft carrier task force headed towards the Persian Gulf in case Iran decides to get involved. So we've got all kinds of things going on overseas. We've got all kinds of opportunities for the same thing to happen here in the U.S. We've had 6 million people come across our borders. We don't know what their intentions are. We don't know what their capabilities are. We don't know why they're here. They say they're here for asylum, but so did Tlaib and Ilan Omar. They said they came here for sanctuary, and yet they come here and create the same problems that they ran away from. So, how soon is that going to erupt over there? How soon is it going to erupt over here? I don't know. All I can say is say your prayers. It sure would be nice if we all understood that we're all human beings. We have to coexist on this planet. And that's a trite word from the left, and I appreciate that. But in reality, we need to find a way to get along. We need to find a way to stop the cycle of hatred, and that's all it is we've just got way too much hatred on the planet Earth, and we need to eradicate that. Come up with a little bit more peace and understanding, and I would be a happier person if we could come up with more peace and understanding. Yes, there were some. I have heard the same thing, that there were some who had infiltrated, and they had the paraglider brigade, they had the motorcycle brigade, they had some Toyota truck brigade. They had all kinds of different stuff going across. But they certainly had some sleepers, and we certainly have some sleepers here in the U.S. Turkey has offered to try to negotiate. I don't think that's going to work because Turkey has already told has already told NATO to back off, that if it goes to a shooting war, that Turkey is going to side with the Palestinians, and the vast majority of NATO countries are siding with Israel. So, we've got that contention there as well. So, all I can say is say your prayers and pray for peace. And that's, there are a lot of stuff going on that can cause consternation and cause us to bad things to happen. And I wish we could avoid that. I wish we could just say your prayers and be kind, polite, and respectful to your fellow man, because if you can do that to them, they can do it in return. So that's pretty much where we are for this evening. Let me see. Yeah, so and Sandy Aaron says she agrees with that, and I agree with that 100%. So I don't want to, I don't want to predict what's going to happen. As an analyst, as an intelligence analyst, what I have to do is I have to take a look at the facts and the indicators. And we can say the indicators show, but in this case, we can't say indicators show because we don't have any indicators of that type. We do have some facts. We do know that approximately 6 million people have crossed the border. We do know that at least 30,000 Chinese, well-dressed, well-groomed, of military age, unaccompanied, have entered into the country. That looks like military to me. We have had Russians, we've had Saudis, we've had a lot of people on the terrorist watch list try to get across. We don't know who has gotten in, who has, escaped capture or identification. Could there be those same people on the terrorist watch list who have gotten in and we just don't know about them? We don't know what we don't know. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be concerned about. I was watching one of my favorite channels today. He says, if you are authorized to carry, carry. And, that's his recommendation. And so I ordered something called a, let me get the Amazon here. It's on sale. But one of the guys in my group, in my prepper group, said, "Hey guys, look at this! It's on sale." So I looked at it and it's on sale. So I ordered it. It arrives day after tomorrow, and it is called the Cold Steel Brooklyn Basher, and it's a 24-inch steel baseball bat. So keep that at the front door. I don't want to necessarily keep other things close where people might get a hand on them. Now, one of the other things is please also be careful. For those of you who live on the West Coast, there have been a swarm of earthquakes along the West Coast. Yesterday, it was all along the Ring of Fire coming over into the Western United States. So we've got a swarm. Earthquake.usgs.gov, and you can see all the earthquakes that have been happening. They are happening. So if you're on the West Coast, be prepared for that. Make sure you're prepped for an earthquake and a response to an earthquake. And with that, yes, Sandy. And as a matter of fact, they have a video of them being let off of a bus in Juarez, which is right across from El Paso. They arrived in Juarez on a bus, like 34 or 40 of them in one bus. They were just let out of the bus. They walked up to the border and crossed. And so, yeah, that is suspicious to me, ominous to me. That is, I don't like that at all. But that's where we are. Okay. So we will finish up next week with 18th century history questions on the USCIS test. And don't forget, tomorrow night, we're going to finish up the last of the book on situational awareness on our book club, our nonfiction book club. So this is the last night of this is tomorrow night. And now I do have an appointment. We've got a request for assistance from a guy who needs some housing, and he's living in his van right now. So I've got an appointment with him tomorrow night to see if we can help him with some money or something, or housing or anything like that. And I think I've got it scheduled, so I'll be here on time tomorrow night. Keep our fingers crossed. But if I'm just a couple of minutes late, wait for me, because you are my priority, but I also have to get this poor guy taken care of. So starting a week from tomorrow night, we're going to start this one, the 2022 or third edition. This has some updates with some of the newer technologies from the Ukraine-Russian war. So with that, remember, we got to go to Numbers. We got to go to Numbers. The book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 24, 25, and 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. So remember that we're all in this together, so we can come out the other side together. Please. I know it's an effort for me too. But please be kind, polite, respectful to each other. Give the other person the benefit of the doubt. Let somebody in traffic. Just surprise them. Let them in. Do something nice for somebody. Buy somebody a cup of coffee. You never can tell. But be kind, polite, and respectful to each other, because togetherness is how we're all going to survive this thing. So take care. Bye-bye.